In a gritty industrial corner of Brooklyn, New York, an artist named Gregory Clone dragged a rusted steel trash dumpster into his workshop and started cutting into it with a grinder. His friends thought it was another one of his strange art projects, but months later, that dumpster had a kitchenette, a tiny toilet, a fold-out bed, a skylight, and a wooden sun deck bolted to the roof. Little luxuries nobody expects to find inside a garbage container. He didn't just build it, he moved in. And that ridiculous, wonderful little box on a Brooklyn street corner quietly started a movement that is now putting real roofs, real kitchens, and real front doors over the heads of homeless families and veterans from California to Missouri. This is how it happened. To understand why a grown man would choose to live in a garbage container, you have to understand what Gregory Clohan saw every day. He split his time between Brooklyn and Oakland, California, and in both cities, he watched the same thing. Brand new luxury apartment towers going up on one side of the street and people sleeping under tarps and shopping carts on the other. As an artist and a builder, he kept staring at the construction dumpsters parked outside those towers. Big, ugly steel boxes, tough enough to survive being slammed around by garbage trucks for decades, waterproof when sealed, fireproof and rodent-proof. And when a construction job ended, many of them were simply scrapped. So around 2011, he bought one, a standard 6-yard commercial dumpster, the kind you see behind every grocery store in America. He pressure washed years of grime out of it, cut a doorway into the steel, and got to work. He insulated the walls. He wired it for electricity and ran a small water tank. He installed a compact stove, a little sink, and storage that folded away like the inside of a sailboat. He added windows, a skylight, and that rooftop deck where he could sit in the evening with a cold drink and watch the Manhattan skyline glow across the East River. When photos of the finished dumpster home hit the internet, people didn't know whether to laugh or applaud. Television crews showed up. Reporters climbed inside and couldn't believe how pleasant it was. One journalist who toured it for a national morning show described sitting in it as strangely cozy, like a cabin that happened to be made of garbage. Clohan would host little rooftop parties on top of it, grilling for friends while confused pedestrians stopped on the sidewalk and stared. But for Clohan, the joke had a sharp edge. If one man with basic tools could turn a literal trash container into a place worth living in, what did that say about a country where hundreds of thousands of people were sleeping on concrete? He wasn't the only one asking that question, because down in Austin, Texas, a university dean was about to take the idea even further, and what he did earned him a nickname that followed him for the rest of his career. In 2014, Jeff Wilson was a dean and environmental science professor at Houston Tillotson University, a small historically black college in East Austin. He had a good salary, a nice apartment, and by his own admission, a life full of stuff he didn't need. Then he made a decision that made national news. He sold nearly everything he owned, some of it for $1 an item, and moved into a used trash dumpster parked right on campus. 33 square feet, smaller than most walk-in closets, smaller than a prison cell. His students immediately started calling him Professor Dumpster, and the name stuck. The Atlantic magazine even profiled his experiment. But this wasn't a stunt for attention. Wilson called it the Dumpster Project, a year-long experiment to answer one question: how small can a home be and still give a person a good life? He and his students transformed the dumpster in deliberate stages, almost like a scientific experiment on comfort itself. In the first phase, it was bare steel with a sleeping bag, and Wilson lived in it that way on purpose, to feel what rock bottom actually felt like. In the second phase came a false floor, insulation, and a fold-down bed, roughly what a modest home might offer. And in the final phase, the little box got air conditioning, a weather station, and clever storage built into every inch, a kind of miniature dream home. Students used it as a living laboratory, measuring energy use, testing designs, and learning more about sustainable housing from one steel box than from any textbook. Living in it was not glamorous. Texas summers turned the steel box into an oven before the air conditioning went in, and Wilson admitted there were nights he woke up drenched in sweat, wondering what on earth he was doing. But something surprising happened over that year. He found he didn't miss the apartment. He spent more time outside, more time with neighbors and students, more time in the city itself. The dumpster taught him that warmth, safety, and dignity matter far more than square footage. And when the experiment ended, Wilson took those lessons and founded a company designing small, affordable dwellings, convinced that tiny, smart housing could be part of the answer to America's housing crisis. Meanwhile, back in Oakland, Gregory Clowen had stopped joking around entirely because the problem outside his workshop door was getting worse, and he was about to turn dumpsters and construction waste into something that would change real lives. West Oakland, California, is a neighborhood where illegal dumping is a daily plague. Contractors and remodelers, unwilling to pay landfill fees, drive in at night and dump entire truckloads of construction debris on the curbs. Plywood, doors, pallets, insulation, washing machine drums, bed frames. Clowen walked those streets and saw two problems staring at each other: mountains of discarded building materials and human beings sleeping in the rain a few feet away. So he started building. He got to know the rhythm of the illegal, dumping the way a fisherman knows the tides. He learned which corners the contractors favored, which nights the trucks came, and he would cruise those blocks in the morning with his own truck, picking through the piles like a man shopping at a hardware store where everything is free. Using the same skills he had honed on his Brooklyn dumpster, he began collecting the dumped construction waste and turning it into tiny homes for his homeless neighbors. He called it the Homeless Homes Project, and news crews from NBC to local Bay Area stations soon came to film it. Each little house was about the size of a garden shed, built on salvaged wheels so it could roll along the sidewalk, because a structure on wheels was harder for the city to confiscate, a pitched roof to shed the rain, a locking door, which for someone living on the street is almost unimaginable luxury, windows made from old washing machine doors and refrigerator shelves. Some had little porches. Clowen painted them in bright, cheerful colors, reds and blues and sunny yellows, because he insisted these were homes, not storage boxes for human beings. The astonishing part was the cost. Because nearly everything was salvaged from those illegal dump piles, each home required only a small amount of new materials, mostly nails, screws, paint, and caulk. Roughly the cost of a family dinner at a restaurant. Clowen would finish one in a few days of work, then roll it down the street and hand the key to someone who had been sleeping under a tarp. He gave the first one to a homeless couple he'd known for years, a man and woman who had been surviving on that block through winter rains. He later said the look on their faces when they realized the little house was theirs was worth more than anything he'd ever sold in a gallery. Word spread through the neighborhood and then through the country. Photos of those brightly painted little homes rolling through West Oakland appeared in newspapers and on morning shows. Volunteers started showing up at his workshop, asking to learn. Donations of tools and materials arrived from strangers, and other builders in other cities began quietly copying the idea, scavenging waste and building shelters, one door and one roof at a time. But as the movement grew, one group of Americans kept appearing in these stories again and again: the veterans. According to the federal government's own annual count, on any given night in this country, tens of thousands of the men and women who wore the uniform are sleeping in cars, shelters, and tents. And that fact leads us to the most remarkable chapter of this story, in Kansas City, Missouri. Before we get there, a quick pause. If you are struggling to keep a roof over your own head right now, if someone you love is out on the streets, or if you simply want to know how to actually help the homeless people in your own town, I put together a guide called the Veterans Blueprint. It walks through the housing programs, emergency assistance, and step-by-step strategies that are simply too detailed to cover in a video like this. The specific paperwork, phone numbers, and programs most people are never told about until it's too late. The link is in the description right below this video. Just tap the word "more" under the title and you will see it. It could genuinely change things for you or for someone you care about. Now, back to Kansas City. In 2015, a group of combat veterans in Kansas City kept running into the same heartbreaking scene. Brothers they had served with, men who had carried rifles in Iraq and Afghanistan, were sleeping under highway overpasses in the Missouri winter. These veterans kept falling through the cracks of the official system. Some did not have the right discharge paperwork. Some had served in the National Guard and did not qualify for certain programs. The system had categories, and human beings kept falling between them. So the founders of what became the Veterans Community Project made a promise that sounds almost naive. Any veteran from any era with any discharge status would be welcome, no exceptions. And instead of another crowded shelter, they decided to build something no one had really tried at scale. A village of tiny homes built by veterans for veterans. They found a stretch of unused land in South Kansas City and got to work. Volunteers poured foundations in the summer heat. Local contractors donated lumber and labor. Girl Scout troops and church groups showed up on weekends with paintbrushes. Slowly, rows of small, handsome houses took shape, nearly 50 of them, each one around 240 square feet, with a real bed, a kitchenette, a bathroom, heating and air conditioning, and a front porch. Every home came fully furnished, right down to dishes in the cabinets and art on the walls, most of it donated by families around Kansas City. And because these homes were designed by veterans who understood combat, they included details no ordinary architect would think of. The beds are positioned so that a resident lying down can always see the door, because for a man with post-traumatic stress, sleeping with his back to an entrance is impossible. The homes sit in quiet rows with clear sight lines, no dark corners, no surprises. These weren't just houses. They were houses built by people who knew exactly what it feels like to never fully relax. And here is the detail that gets people every time. Each veteran's new home is set up before they arrive so that when they open the door for the first time, it already looks like someone lives there, because someone does. Them, grown men who had survived firefights overseas, have stood in those doorways and wept over a made bed and a coffee maker. But the village was never just about the buildings. In the center of the property sits a community center with caseworkers, counselors, and job training. The tiny homes are transitional, a safe and dignified place to stabilize, deal with the paperwork, the health issues, and the wounds you can't see, and then move into permanent housing. And it works. The overwhelming majority of veterans who move through the village go on to permanent homes and jobs. The model was so successful that Veterans Community Project began building villages in other cities, from Colorado to Wisconsin, with more on the way. Now, Kansas City proved a village of tiny homes could rescue veterans, but 3 states away, in the Texas Hill Country, one man was proving the same idea could work for entire families, at a scale nobody thought possible. On the eastern edge of Austin, Texas, sits a place called Community First Village, and driving into it feels like discovering a small town that time forgot to make cynical. It's the vision of a former real estate developer named Alan Graham, who spent years driving a food truck to homeless camps around Austin with his ministry, Mobile Loaves and Fishes. After thousands of conversations on curbs and under bridges, Graham reached a conclusion that reshaped everything. The deepest wound of homelessness isn't the lack of a roof, it's the loss of family and community. People don't just need housing, they need neighbors. So he built a neighborhood. Community First Village opened its first phase in 2015 on 27 acres, and it has grown into hundreds of tiny homes and recreational vehicles, with more phases under construction, on track to house well over 1,000 formerly homeless Texans. There are gardens where residents grow vegetables, a blacksmith shop and art studio where they earn income, an outdoor movie theater, chapels, chicken coops, and a bed and breakfast where curious visitors stay the night. Residents pay modest rent, most of it covered by the money they earn working in the village itself. Men and women who spent decades on the streets now wave to each other from front porches, and some have reunited with children and grandchildren they hadn't seen in years. There's one tradition in the village that says everything about what Graham built. When a resident passes away, the whole community gathers for a memorial service with flowers, stories, and tears. Think about what that means. On the streets, a homeless man can die and be buried by the county with no one present, a name on a form and nothing more. In Community First Village, no one dies unknown and no one is buried alone. That, Graham says, is what family means. And it's the thing no amount of square footage can provide. And the movement kept spreading. In Seattle, Washington, the Low Income Housing Institute began building entire villages of small cottages for people leaving the streets. And mothers with young children have moved from tents into painted cottages with heat and locking doors, often within weeks. In Detroit, Michigan, a nonprofit called Cass Community Social Services built a neighborhood of charming little houses, each one a different style, a Tudor here, a modern cottage there. So the street looks like a real neighborhood and not a housing project. Residents there rent their homes for 7 years, and if they keep up the modest payments, the house becomes theirs. Deed, keys, everything. For people who spent years being told they'd never own anything, that piece of paper changes how they walk down the street. In Oregon, communities like Opportunity Village in Eugene showed that residents themselves could help govern and maintain their villages. City by city, the idea Gregory Clone welded together in a Brooklyn dumpster had grown into a national blueprint. So why dumpsters? Why construction waste? The answer is a number so large it's hard to picture. The United States generates roughly 600 million tons of construction and demolition debris every single year, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. That's about twice the weight of all our regular household garbage combined. Mountains of perfectly good lumber, doors, windows, fixtures, and steel, much of it buried in landfills while people sleep outside. And here's the comparison that makes city officials squirm. In parts of California, building a single unit of government-subsidized affordable housing can cost more than $500,000 and take years of permits and hearings. Meanwhile, a man in Oakland was putting a locking door over someone's head in a few days for the price of a dinner out. The builders in this movement looked at that mountain of waste and saw free walls, free roofs, and free front doors. Now, honesty requires saying that not everyone applauds. City officials in Oakland worried that Cloan's rolling shelters lacked plumbing and could become permanent encampments on sidewalks. Some housing advocates argue that tiny homes risk becoming a cheap substitute for the real apartments people ultimately need. Zoning boards in many towns have fought these villages, and neighbors have packed city council meetings to object. The builders themselves mostly agree with the critics on one point. A 240-square-foot cottage is not the final answer to homelessness. But as one volunteer in Kansas City put it, you cannot solve anything for a man who froze to death last night. First the door that locks, then everything else. And the results keep answering the skeptics. Veterans who spent a decade outdoors are holding jobs and leases. Families in Seattle's villages have moved on to permanent apartments. Austin's village keeps expanding because it works and because ordinary people keep funding it. One small donation and one Saturday of volunteering at a time. Which brings us back to that rusted dumpster in Brooklyn. Gregory Cloyne's neighbors thought he was crazy for climbing into a garbage container with a grinder and a dream. Maybe he was, a little. But every movement that ever mattered started with someone willing to look foolish. Today, because of people like him, like Professor Dumpster in Austin, like the veterans in Kansas City, and the food truck missionary in Texas, thousands of Americans who once slept on concrete now turn a key in their own front door every night. It turns out the most valuable thing in America was sitting in our trash all along. We just needed somebody to see it. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, because every week I share true stories of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things for their neighbors. And if you, or someone you care about, is fighting to keep a roof overhead, that guide, the Veteran's Blueprint, is waiting in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.